My name is Alma Strickland. I am 63 years old, and I have lived alone in a 2-bedroom condo on the 4th floor of a building called Heron Court in Caldwell, North Carolina, for 6 years. The bedroom facing east gets the morning light through a window I keep cracked even in winter. The other bedroom I use for a sewing table. And my late husband's old armchair, the one with the left armrest, starting to show the batting through the fabric. I retired there for the quiet. I got 8 months of it before my son-in-law called on a Tuesday evening in March and told me his parents were moving in. He didn't ask, he told. "They've got nowhere to go," he said. "And you've got a whole second bedroom sitting there collecting dust." Then he said the thing I have thought about every day since. If you've got a problem with it, maybe it's time to think about downsizing anyway. I did not argue. I said I would look into a few things. He said fine, the way a man says fine when he believes the conversation is already over. What I set out on my kitchen counter the morning, his parents drove up from Ohio, is a thing my daughter has not fully forgiven me for. Not yet. I grew up in Caldwell. My father installed flooring for 31 years, hardwood, vinyl tile, whatever people needed, and he told me more than once that a house is just a box until somebody decides to stay in it. I stayed. I went to community college here, got my HR certification, and in 1988 I took an entry-level position in human resources at Blue Ridge Regional Medical Center. I was 25 years old, sitting at a metal desk with a telephone that rang every 12 minutes, and a supervisor who called me Hon until I corrected her. It took 3 times. I stayed at Blue Ridge for 30 years. When I retired in 2018, I was the director of human resources. I managed benefits, compensation, grievances, and the complicated business of keeping a 1,400-person institution running without catching fire. I knew every clause, every exemption, every covenant that touched employment at that hospital. I signed papers that affected people's lives, and I never signed anything I hadn't read from the first page to the last. My husband Dale passed in 2016, a short illness, not enough warning. He was a good man who fixed things quietly and never raised his voice in 31 years of marriage. Our daughter Nina was 30 at the time, already married and living down in Charlotte. When I retired, I sold the family house, 4 bedrooms, half an acre, 3 decades of everything, and bought the condo at Heron Court. I could have afforded something larger. I chose smaller on purpose. Here is what matters about Heron Court. I did not buy it the way most people buy a place. Blue Ridge Regional had operated an employee housing covenant program for 22 years. If you had worked there for at least 10 consecutive years, you could apply to purchase a unit in one of 4 Caldwell County developments at a restricted price, considerably below what the open market would have charged. The restriction runs with the deed. The covenant caps what you can sell it for, limits who can live in it, and requires the owner to maintain it as their primary residence. I qualified. I applied. I paid $187,000 for a condo that would have listed at $340,000 on the open market. That gap is 30 years of showing up to a job that mattered, and it is the only reason a woman on a public sector salary could ever have owned something like it. The covenant is administered by the Caldwell County Workforce Housing Authority, 2nd floor of the municipal building on Garrison Street. I had signed my annual compliance certification every year without exception since purchase. I knew every section of my deed restriction the way I knew the Blue Ridge Employee Handbook. 2000 April happened because of how I bought that condo in 2018. My daughter Nina is 38. She manages the front desk for a pediatric practice in Charlotte, and she is one of the warmest, most patient people I know. She calls me Sunday evenings, usually around 8 o'clock. She married my son-in-law in 2012. He's 41 now. He owns a landscaping and outdoor services company. 6 employees, 3 trucks, a decent reputation around town. He builds retaining walls and outdoor kitchens, and he is genuinely skilled at the physical work. He is also a man who has difficulty distinguishing between things that are his business and things that are not. My son-in-law stopped coming inside my home after I declined to provide documentation for a county contractor license renewal in 2019. Short version. The renewal required HR records I couldn't produce because they didn't exist in the form he claimed. I told him that. He said I was making it complicated. After that, he drove my daughter up for holidays, sat in the parking structure with the engine running, and texted her when he was ready to leave. She said he was tired. I stopped commenting on it because commenting made her defend him, and defending him made her go quiet in a way that lasted for days. His parents are Vernon and Shirley. Vernon is 74, retired from a manufacturing plant in Dayton after 32 years. Shirley is 71, worked as a school secretary in Ohio for 20 years. They are not unkind people. What happened to them is the kind of thing that happens to a lot of people who did everything expected of them and still came out short. In 2022, they sold their house in Dayton for $241,000. Good timing. They bought a 32-foot RV, spent a year and a half traveling, gave some money to my son-in-law to cover a bad business quarter, and paid off Vernon's hip surgery. By early this year, they had the RV parked at a campground in Tennessee at $680 a month, a Dodge with high mileage, and Social Security. Maybe $2,100 between them combined. I felt sorry for them. I want to say that plainly, because the entire situation went sideways, not because anyone was a villain, but because I let people watch me feel sorry for two elder people and draw conclusions about what that meant. Tuesday, March 11th. I was at my kitchen counter slicing a butternut squash when my son-in-law called. My daughter was on the line too, somewhere in the background, dishes running. "So we've worked it out," he said. "Mom and Dad are going to come stay with you. They can be there by mid-April." I said that was a significant arrangement to have worked out without me. "You've got 2 bedrooms, Alma. They're paying almost $700 a month to park an RV in Tennessee. Do the math." I told him I'd like to have a real conversation about it, at a time when everyone could sit down. There's nothing to sit down about. They need a place. You've got space. That's the whole conversation. Then he said it. "And if the condo is getting to be too much to manage on your own, maybe this is a good time to think about something smaller." I had made 312 mortgage and HOA payments on that condo. I had signed every compliance form, maintained the unit, paid every assessment. And my son-in-law was suggesting, in the same breath as installing his parents in my home, that I might want to consider selling and moving on. I said, "Let me look into a few things." He said, "Fine." I hung up and stood there with the squash and understood that the conversation he thought had just ended was the beginning of a file. My daughter drove up that Saturday. She brought coffee and a bag of the little butter crackers I like. She sat at my kitchen table with her coat still on. That's what she does when she's planning to leave before the conversation gets hard. "It's just temporary," she said, "until they work something out." I asked what temporary meant in months. She turned her cup in a slow circle on the table. Reed already told them yes, his mom has started packing. I asked her to look at me. She looked at the window. "Nina," I said, "do you remember what I asked you to do for me in January of 2023 when I had my cataract surgery?" Her hand went still on the cup. "That was the winter I had surgery on both eyes, 3 weeks apart. For about a month, I couldn't read anything smaller than a road sign. My annual occupancy certification for the housing covenant was due in February. Nina had sat at my kitchen table and read me the entire form out loud so I could confirm the details before signing. Section 4. Section 5. She read the occupancy restrictions in her own voice, in this room, 2.5 years ago. She had known what was in my deed restriction. She had known for 2.5 years and had not said one word to her husband. "Mom," she said quietly. "They're old. They have nowhere." Then she reached into her bag and pulled out a folded piece of paper. Sent Shirley's handwriting, round and careful. A list of things she would need in the guest room. A particular dresser with deep drawers, a chair near the window, a lamp suitable for reading at night, a small refrigerator if there was an available outlet. Someone had already chosen which room was hers. I slid the list under my coffee mug. I told her I would look into things carefully and get back to everyone. She was out the door in under 5 minutes. After she left, I went to the filing cabinet in my home office and pulled out a manila folder I had not opened in 2 years. 14 pages, my deed restriction, certified copy, with the Caldwell County Workforce Housing Authority's blue stamp on the cover. I sat at my kitchen table and read it the way I used to read benefit plan documents at Blue Ridge. Front to back, pencil in hand, margin notes on a legal pad, because a document you can't cite by page is just an opinion. Page 6, Section 5.2. Occupancy restricted to the qualifying owner and approved household members. Approved household defined as spouse, domestic partner, or dependent children. Not parents, not in-laws, not extended family, unless the authority grants a specific exemption under Section 5.4, which requires the additional occupant to meet qualifying employment criteria, meaning prior employment at a covered Caldwell County employer for a minimum of 8 consecutive years. Shirley had been a school secretary in Ohio. Vernon had worked manufacturing in Dayton. Neither had ever been employed at Blue Ridge Regional or any covered employer in this county. I knew the answer before I filed anything, but here is why I filed anyway. My daughter had asked me. She had sat at my table with her coat on and said they have nowhere, and I have never been able to give my child nothing when she asks me for something real. So I gave her the only honest thing I had. A proper application, filled out completely with everything in their favor that I could put in writing. If the answer came back yes, I would have bought a dresser. I had already looked one up at the furniture store on Route 16 because Shirley's list said deep drawers, and I am the kind of woman who reads the list. Nobody in that family believed that part afterward. It is the part I keep coming back to. I downloaded Form WH9, Household Composition Change Request, from the authority's website. I filled it out at my kitchen table on a Monday morning and drove it to Garrison Street. Vernon E. Rollins, retired, Dayton Consolidated Industries, Ohio. Shirley M. Rollins, retired, Jefferson Township Schools, Ohio. Relationship to owner, parents of owner's son-in-law. In the reason section, I used all 4 lines. I wrote that they had sold their home, that their income was Social Security, that they did not appear to meet the standard qualifying criteria under Section 5.2, and that I was formally requesting a determination of whether any exemption applied under 5.4. The clerk, a young man in a blue polo, looked it over and said 15 business days. I said either way was fine. Either way. I drove home and sat in Dale's old armchair for a while. 30 years of filing things for other people. This was different. This was mine. That same week, I went to a small cookout. The building association holds every spring, 2 buildings over. A neighbor's brother-in-law is a realtor in Caldwell. I've known him since he sold his first listing. He was standing near the drink cooler with his phone out, and he turned it toward me with the particular careful expression of a man delivering a warning. "Someone called me about your building last month," he said. "Asked me to look into whether the covenant could be lifted. I told them it's permanent, doesn't expire." The screen showed my address, an estimated open market value, $378,000. My son-in-law had been talking to a realtor about removing my deed restriction. "Some of these expire," I imagined him saying. "Check again." I stood there and understood 2 things in the correct order. First, if I downsized, if I sold the condo as he'd suggested, I would not receive $378,000. The covenant caps resale at a formula-based price. I would net roughly $214,000 after calculation. The $164,000 difference he'd been imagining didn't exist. It had never been inside that condo. It was never going to belong to anyone. Second, and worse, he had said all of this on speakerphone. My daughter was 4 feet away. She had filled a glass of water and set it down and said nothing. I drove home and wrote 3 things on the back of an envelope. 1. Get a certified copy of the recorded deed restriction. 2. Wait for the authority's determination. 3. Follow whatever it says. Number 2 is the one people find hard to believe. I did it because my daughter asked me, and I owed her a real answer. Not my reading of the document, but the authorities' official word. 15 business days, I counted them. On day 13, the envelope came. Request denied. Proposed occupants do not meet qualifying employment criteria under Section 5.2b. No exemption applies under Section 5.4. Owner reminded that occupancy by non-approved household members constitutes a covenant violation subject to a 20-day notice period and daily fines of $200 per unauthorized occupant. The authority reserves the right to pursue specific performance and, in cases of willful or extended violation, reversion of the covenant unit. A compliance site visit had been scheduled for April 24th. 5 days after the date my son-in-law had chosen for his parents to arrive. I put the letter in the folder with the blue stamp, sat down at my kitchen table, and didn't turn the lights on for a while. I called my son-in-law that evening and read him 3 sentences. Denied. Section 5.2. 20 days. $200 a day per person. He was quiet for a moment. That's a housing office. Above a parking lot. They're not going to pursue 2 retired people over a paperwork technicality. I told him the letter had a date and a contact name on it. Then his voice dropped to something lower. You know you're not going to be managing that condo forever, he said. At some point, somebody's going to be making decisions for you, and that somebody is Nina. I asked him to finish the thought. I'm just saying, be careful how hard you dig in on a property you won't be maintaining much longer. There it was, out loud on a Tuesday night in April. He did not want a guest room for his parents. He wanted his parents already inside my approved household, so that when I had a bad winter, a difficult diagnosis, a year I couldn't keep up with the paperwork, the people living in my home would be Rollins's, and the person managing my affairs would be his wife. I said the only words I said for the rest of that call. Then, it's going to be no from me tonight. And I hung up on my daughter's husband, for the first time in 11 years. The evening before his parents were scheduled to arrive, I set 4 things on my kitchen counter and wrote a card. The certified deed restriction, 14 pages, blue stamp on the cover, page 6 folded at the corner. The denial letter face up. My February occupancy certification, signed under penalty of perjury, listing 1 occupant, me, and Dale's pocket notebook, small, navy blue, the one he kept in his shirt pocket for 30 years, where he recorded floor measurements in his small, careful handwriting. I set it on top of the stack as a paperweight. It was just where my hand went. The card I wrote twice to get it short. Vernon and Shirley, there's a chicken casserole in the refrigerator. 375 degrees, 45 minutes. Please read the letter under the notebook before you bring anything inside. A. I turned the porch light on and left early the next morning. I spent that Saturday with a woman I saw beside the ridge for nearly 20 years, a colleague who had taught me in 1991 how to read an employment contract word by word, and who now lives in assisted care on the north side of Caldwell. We had coffee. She told me about her granddaughter's licensing exam. She asked whether I'd been keeping up with my walking. My phone buzzed 9 times in 40 minutes. She looked at it, then at me. You going to check that? It's already answered, I said. She put her hand flat over mine and left it there. That's when the crying happened. 4 or 5 seconds, no more. Not over the letter. Not over the condo. Over the card I'd written in my own handwriting, telling 2 people how long to heat the casserole because I had meant it. That is what nobody in my family has been able to hold. I had wanted the answer to be yes, and it wasn't, and I still made the note. I came home at noon. Vernon's recliner was on my small patio. My son-in-law was in the parking lot holding page 6 of the deed restriction by the corner. Just that page, the way you hold something you already suspect is going to beat you. What is this? He said. I took the page back and read Section 5.2 out loud in a level voice, the way I used to read policy language to new department heads. The unit is restricted to the qualifying owner and approved household members as defined herein. Then I told him the thing he had still not understood. His suggestion that I sell the condo if I found the situation inconvenient was actually the one move guaranteed to take it from me. Selling outside the covenant protocol would have triggered reversion. Moving out to accommodate his parents would have violated the primary residency clause. Both of his solutions would have cost me the home faster than anything I might have done. Your way was the only way to lose it, I said. I'm the reason it's still standing. He hit the roof of his truck with the flat of his hand. He said I had set a trap. He said I had been sitting on this since March like I was waiting. He called me a paper pusher with a file drawer twice, and the second time his voice broke on it. You could have just said no. I told him I had. On the phone in March, I had said let me look into some things. I had asked him twice to sit down at a table with me before any plans were finalized. He had said he didn't need a form to move his parents. The decisions had already been made before I could draw a breath. My daughter pulled into the lot at 4 p.m. and sat in her car a long time before she got out. Shirley was inside. I found her at my kitchen counter, the casserole dish in her hands, the foil half off. She didn't turn around when I came in. I don't have anywhere, she said, very quiet. I got close enough to put a hand on her shoulder. Then she said, "Can't you just fix the paperwork? You're good at all that." I set the folder on the counter between us. I turned my February certification so it faced her. One name. Signed under penalty of perjury. I told her what the covenant was and why it existed, that I could only buy this unit because I had worked in this county for 30 years on a public employee salary, and that the restriction was precisely the mechanism that had made the price possible. That the difference between the covenant price and the market value wasn't money being withheld from anyone. It had never existed as anything else. It was the program. It was the whole point. She read it. She reads fine. Then she put the foil back on the casserole dish, carefully, and said, "Reed told me it was handled." That was the closest anyone came to an apology. It was about him, not to me. They left 3 days later, before the compliance visit. My son-in-law came alone with a small trailer, made 2 trips, and did not knock either time. On his way out, without being asked, he took the recycling bin to the curb. A small, ordinary thing. I noticed it and have thought about it since, because it is the only thing he did that whole spring that I did not expect. My daughter did not call for 6 weeks. 6 Sundays in a row with no phone ringing at 8 o'clock, and each one felt different than I expected. Then on a Wednesday, she drove up without warning. She sat at my kitchen table and picked up Dale's pocket notebook and turned it over in her hands, looked at the cover, set it back down. "I should have told him in 2023, she said, when I read you the form out loud." I told her that was true. I also said what I'd come to understand about myself in the months since, that for 30 years I had communicated with my daughter the way I communicated with employees. Policies left on counters. Forms filled out and slid across desks. Documentation in place of sentences. I had taught her that hard things arrive in writing, that you confirm them and file them and keep a copy. And then I was surprised when she kept her mouth shut and handed the hard thing to someone else to manage. That's on me. I said it at my own table, out loud, which does not come naturally to me. We have one boundary now, and it is the only one I needed to name. The guest room is hers only, and she knocks. My son-in-law does not come inside this home. If either of them ever wants to talk about what happens to this condo someday, they begin by reading Section 5.2 out loud to me, so we all know we're starting from the same page. She said that was fair. She stayed until almost 9. We ate crackers and sharp cheese standing at the counter because neither of us wanted to set the table. Dale's notebook is still on the kitchen counter where I left it that April. I keep the card tucked inside the front cover. Not as proof of anything to anyone else, as proof to myself when I walk past and need to remember I was not being cold that spring. I was being exactly as warm as I could afford to be, which turned out to be 1 casserole, 1 made bed, and 1 card written twice to get it short. A home is not a favor your family lets you keep, and being generous does not mean being available to be moved. The kindest thing I ever did for the people in this story was file an honest form, wait for the answer, and follow what it said. I would do it again tomorrow. If you have never read the deed or the covenants on your own home, all of it, not the summary, not the listing, go read them this week. Tell me in the comments what you found. Drop a like, subscribe if you want to hear the rest of it, and I'll see you next time.